You very quickly get caught up in the question of who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Where did this come from? Who is this person? I mean, this is the 2000s. Information is out there, everything. Everyone knows everything about everybody. How can there possibly be a person that nobody knows who this guy is? But there is a person, and at least they think it's a person, it might be a group, who nobody knows who this guy is. And he kind of appears out of nowhere in 2008 on these cryptography email lists with this system called Bitcoin. He's very active in the early years. There's a lot of back and forth with him communicating with people.
It seemed like most people kind of wrote him off. It's kind of like a illusions of grandeur kind of scheme. Hal Finney, on the other hand, seemed to be really interested right from the beginning. He was a crypto idealist. Like, he was not as kind of cynical as many of the other cypherpunks. So he got really into this. He started talking to Satoshi Nakamoto, who he said seemed like some young Japanese American coder.
Hal Finney was the first guy to work with Nakamoto. He was a cryptographer. As soon as Nakamoto released it, he was one of the first people to email him back and say, hey, this is interesting, I'd like to work with you. And in the first weeks of Bitcoin, he worked with him back and forth setting up the system.
And Satoshi Nakamoto ended up sending Hal Finney the first ever Bitcoin transaction.
Any discussion of Satoshi's identity has to go back to the fact that Bitcoin was based on this small number of projects back in the 1990s that only a handful of people knew about, like Hashcash and BitGold and B-Money. And so you end up with a pretty small group of people who would have known about these projects.
People thought David Chaum was, everybody in the cypherpunk movement at one point or another, they've said, well, he must have been Satoshi. They've all come out and denied it. Probably somebody who started out in the 90s in California with the cypherpunks, somebody who was very, very good at cryptography, who understands encryption, and has done a wonderful job of just separating Bitcoin from anything that can identify him.